All right, let's get a bit more on this. We're joined by Fidel Fernando, who is ESPN Cricinfo's Sri Lanka correspondent. Fidel, nice to see you. This looks a bit ugly, doesn't it? What's going on?
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I think you recapped the main events, which is on Monday and Tuesday. The government installed an interim committee. Then on Tuesday, the courts of Sri Lanka removed that interim committee and essentially reinstated the old board. What is actually happening requires a little bit of explanation of what happened at the ICC. So the ICC board is made up of members of representative cricket boards from around the world. There are 12 full member nations. Sri Lanka is one of them. And Shammi Silva, the Sri Lankan cricket president, is one of the members of the ICC board. So what has essentially happened is that the ICC board has been convinced to fire a kind of a shot across the bows against the Sri Lankan government, because what the ICC doesn't want is for member boards to be intervened on or to be intruded on by their governments. And that has been the case, or the Sri Lankan government has attempted that. The Sri Lankan Sports Ministry has attempted that in the last week. And what the ICC doesn't want is for that to happen. And Shammi Silva, the Sri Lankan president, who was, ousted briefly by that intervention or that intrusion, and then reinstated by the courts, has convinced the ICC board to suspend Sri Lankan cricket as a warning. There is no very serious, tangible, immediate repercussions for Sri Lankan cricket itself at the moment.
Okay, so it's a shot across the bows. How has all this gone down in Sri Lanka?
I mean, when you read the word suspension, and I think that was very deliberately chosen as a word, I think people go into a little bit of panic. You wonder if your team is eligible to play bilateral cricket, the cricket in England next summer, as you say, whether they'll be allowed to take part in ICC tournaments. But there is no cricket kind of scheduled for Sri Lanka for the next month, roughly. There's a domestic tournament happening in December, but there's no bilateral cricket for the men's or women's teams for a little while. So I think this has been a well-chosen time to do this. The ICC wants to send a message, and there is nothing on the line in terms of matches happening in the next little while. So that's why I think this works for the ICC as a strategy.
Okay, so they've sent their message. What happens next?
Now that's up to the Sri Lankan government, which in itself is a kind of disunited and not particularly. It's a force that it has many agendas within it. So I think we will have to wait to see what the Sri Lankan government's response is. But my suspicion is that the ICC's move here may be somewhat successful in kind of fending off the government's advances. The SLC has had interim boards before. The ICC has never made this kind of suspension. They've never had this kind of sanction on Sri Lanka's boards, even though they've had this kind of intrusions from governments before. So this is something new. We're treading on new ground here, and we'll have to wait and see. But my suspicion is that the government will be deterred enough, and the news cycle will have moved on enough because of the Sri Lanka men's teams kind of crash and burn at the World Cup over the last week or so. This has been in the news and has been dominating the news cycle. But once that stops happening, I suspect the government will be less interested in the kind of ins and outs and goings on at SLC.
Sure. Fidel, they weren't the only ones to crash and burn, let me tell you. Fidel Fernando, thank you so much for joining us.